Hey everyone. Okay, so I want to share something with everybody before we get started real quick. I woke up with a really bad taste in my mouth this morning. Yesterday, same thing. I woke up with a really horrible taste in my mouth. I know I brushed. I do every night. Even got a new brush out of the cupboard. Anyway, it turns out it wasn't any of those things. The real reason why I was having an awful taste in my mouth for the last 2 days, I finally figured it out, is because I watched CDPR's co-founder Marcin Nowinski 2 nights ago, who posted his absolute horrible owning it video. And I don't really even care that much. I mean, I'll catch a YouTube vid popping up about Cyberpunk, but not always. And I play the game, and to some extent, I like it. But certainly not in its current state. And also, not enough for me to come out and make a freaking video about it on YouTube. And that's the funny and weird part about all of this. But I digress. During the time I watched the apology statement, and afterward, I honestly felt nauseated by this video. I'm not even kidding. Right, so sorry about that, but I just had to share it. Also, just to quickly give some context to how the vid came together, was basically me reading an article on the apology video, to which I will be mentioning some pieces written there and also my own thoughts along the way. I'll also leave a link to the article down below. Alright, let's jump in and dissect this apology, shall we? So, it's been just over a month after the incredibly dreadful launch of Cyberpunk 2077, which, let's face it, was a disaster. As I said, CDPR issued yet another full statement apologizing to us poor console gamers. Now, you can go check it out if you feel like pausing the vid first, but honestly, you're not missing much. He also goes on to state their plan of action for the future of the game, all in order to regain the trust of the players and, more importantly, I'd say, their investors. And then there's also their attempt to get Cyberpunk back into a playable, if not at the very least, at an acceptable state for everyone. Or at the least, that's what they'd have us believe, right? On the surface, a lot of vague promises, but underneath, a terrible excuseful statement that continues to shift the blame rather than taking ownership of the issues, which is exactly what he needed to do. The statement they gave us is quite frankly terrible and continues to highlight the issues of bad leadership the studio has. Now, after a bit of posturing about culture of honesty and transparency, Nowinski then mentions the positive reviews for the PC version of the game before finally getting to the subpar console versions. He basically says in the video that the quality standard wasn't up to par with how they see themselves as a company and the quality bar which they set for themselves, which is, in his words as he states, are the best games in the world. Which is fine, but that's a pretty big miss for them then if the bar is set that high while the Metacritic score, is that low. Anyway, so Nowinski goes on to apologize some more, stating that he and the entire leadership team are deeply sorry, yada yada yada, and this video is basically him simply owning up to it. My opinion, I'd say it's more a statement where he's just trying his hardest to look sad and depressed and to make a bunch of excuses and to have his companies behind polished and saved. Anyway, including casually placing blame on QA by saying they hadn't discovered these issues and using the term old consoles a lot, as if the game wasn't announced before the PS4 even came out. He goes on to state that we, the people, and he asks us nicely too, that we don't fault or blame any of his teams for what happened. Now this is coming from the man who just faulted and blamed those exact same people in a very ambiguous way. And best part is, we've only started the video, people. This is all still in the beginning of his script. It's amazing. Okay, on to the next statement, where we actually get to see him taking a bit of accountability, where he says that himself and the board are the final decision makers and that they are the ones who made the decision to release the game. So that's fine. That's something, at least. But Awinski's ownership here is immediately overshadowed because he shifts to the next point rather quickly to tell us instead about what happened behind the scenes. So I guess owning it wasn't in that part of the script. Gotcha. Moving on. He goes on once again to talk more about the enormous scope of Cyberpunk's world, something we've now heard repeatedly over and over, and it's that very line that got a lot of people running blindly to pre-order the game, years ahead of even having any idea what the game is even going to be about, or even when it would actually release. But instead of admitting that they were maybe a tad bit out of their league, compared to giants like Rockstar, who's been doing open world sandbox games since forever. Now, I don't want to get into a comparison war here, that's not what this video is about, but CDPR's marketing, it was one of the final trailers I believe, did use the words, and I'm quoting Jane Perry here, and she says, next generation of open world gameplay. She said it. He then goes on to blame the decision, and you heard that right, he's blaming the decision on the steps they took on how to optimize the game and how it looks on PC, and then adjust it from there for consoles, basically. So he's basically telling us that in, let's say, 5 to 8 years in development, they couldn't spot that, hey guys, this technique we're trying ain't working. Maybe we should try something else. Hey, what do you think, boss? Release it! That's basically it. Okay, jokes aside, the list of discovered, dropped features and system, including ones previously announced or shown in the 44-minute trailers, and then not including those features in the final game, suggests that the problem was not simply a visual optimization. Now, this apology video excuses the issues that PC players also had with the game, despite the sparkling 10 out of 10 review scores that were baked into the systems and mechanics. But there's no admission of that here in this video. This video just focuses solely on visual bugs and issues and not half-assed systems and missing or scrapped content. Man, I love this article. Getting back to the PC and consoles complication, he goes on to talk about how regular improvements to the PC version required reworking on a regular basis on the old gen consoles. Now let's not forget that PS5 and Xbox Series X didn't even release until less than a month before Cyberpunk did. Not to mention that the next gen versions for those consoles weren't even available at launch and still isn't. In fact, the update won't even be available until a very vague second half of the year. You know, it is nice lingo to have though, to be able to blame the gap on old consoles. But the fact is this game, and I don't care who says what, was in development on those old consoles for a majority of the time it was in development. Anyway. He then states that the team did not catch these issues that players started having at release, believing that everything would be up to date by the time the Day Zero patch was polished. We now know how that went, don't we? Now he continues by saying every change and update needed to be tested, and as it turned out, he says that their testing did not show a big part of the issues that every single person had and is still facing. All the while casually laying blame on the Q&A teams. Conversely, he then talks about seeing improvements each and every day leading up to the release. So which is it? testing didn't catch the issues, or they caught the issues and saw improvement. Now this is the problem. The inconsistency in the statement jumps from one excuse to the next without really thinking about how they should play together, right? So he now moves on to discussing the review process, in which PC copies were sent to limited outlets first with heavy limitations in place, while console copies of the game were limited to just a day or two before release. To many of us, this seemed like intentionally hiding the issue quite clearly present on the console version. And all this in order to secure a positive initial outlook from PC players lucky enough to be hand selected for a code, and before dealing with the ultimate blowback that would come from the terrible console launch. However, he downplays this, saying it was due to the fighting for quality on all gen consoles, and that console codes weren't even sent until late. Okay, now while all that may be true, even if it flies in the face of previous statements saying testing hadn't caught the issues, the absolute lack of communication and transparency to reviewers or even the public during this time was a big problem. The statement indicates to me that CDPR knew there were issues, enough so that they didn't want to have early codes leaked. The statement takes no accountability for how this whole process was handled in a way that intentionally misled the public. It's just it says what we already know, and even then it doesn't even really say half of it, and basically ends up feeling more insulting than reassuring. So, a few points lost there, CDPR. Anyway, from there Mawson gets back on the promises boat again, and we all know how that goes these days, right? He goes on to state that the goal for CDPR right now is to fix bugs and crashes that players are basically experiencing, which basically means that we shouldn't be expecting any integral gameplay mechanical changes, like updating the system's AI or adding some extra activities in the game like, poker or pool, or heck, even let us ride the roller coaster that was marketed as a way to spend our dirty money, and what many seem to be stating now as just a boring open world sandbox that needs activities. And no, hacking is not an activity. Now, none of these are on the priority list right now, especially when the developers are still trying to figure out why characters are falling through the ground or T-posing with their bare ass hanging out while clipping through a sunroof of a car. Man! Moving on. Now we get to the up and coming patches. Okay, so the first two big updates are coming within the next few weeks. Our dear Morris Nowinski said 10 days for 107 to drop from the time his coming out video was taken, though it's not clear what exactly they aim to fix with these patches. Again, no clarity on the situation, no real communication. Maybe something will drop in the next few days, I don't know, but we're basically back at square one. We've come full circle. Man, this guy's good at reading a script. Now, beyond bug fixes, they haven't changed their big plans for long-term support, besides shifting them out further than initially expected, including free and paid for DLC and expansions, as well as the next gen update. Now, free DLC is planned to be rolled out mid-year, as I understand it, while the next gen versions have been pushed to the second half and more toward the back end of the year. I would have thought that the studio couldn't wait to get the next gen Cyberpunk versions out ASAP, because that would for sure boost their ratings and at least the player morale, and surely it should be easier to optimize them on next gen hardware, right? Anyway, then there's the roadmap presented at this point, which is extremely vague. It doesn't offer much in the way of clarity, like exact dates or even any kind of info about what's coming. He basically says multiple updates and improvements will apparently cover the rest of the year. But that's about all we can take away from that. The rest of the video is just more about him posturing about taking the situation seriously and that CDPR is hard at work on the issues at hand, yada yada yada. Good luck with that. If you can figure out in 8 years that people are falling through the floor or being skyrocketed 80 miles high, then I'm not sure that another year is going to matter all that much. But time will tell. Now, at a glance, taking a step back, it's a nice PR message. By far not the best I've heard or seen conveyed, but it will certainly do the job. And by job, I mean placating investors who see apologies and or accountability and those promises for the future. Not that those are worth much for a company that has disintegrated trust with its fans in literally a span of a week. Now, in a nutshell, however, this terrible statement, in my honest opinion, is terrible and is full of contradictory statements and excuses that still fail to own up to the real issues at hand. And a lot of people seem to agree. Gaming reviewers seem to agree, seeing the flawed logic in these statements that sweeps the blame anywhere and everywhere. Instead of taking full accountability for the decision to intentionally mislead players right up to the very end, and to, basically just to end it off, this was meant to be an I own up to it video, right? It's just some food for thought. Alright, let's read a few tweets. Let's see how people are responding to the apology. Sorry, I got a bit excited there. Okay, here we have Imran saying they blame QA, seemingly lie about how much they were aware of the console performance, and frequently referred to as old consoles. Exactly. As if current gen systems didn't come out 3 weeks before the game's release. I mean, I agree. And that's the thing about a lie. Once it's on a roll, you have no choice but to continue that lie and add on to that lie and build on it in order to maintain credibility, right? Now, I would rather them not say anything at all. Just don't do any more apology videos, because I feel that just pisses the community off even more, especially when it comes across as ungenuine and just not heartfelt enough. I feel that it lacked empathy and was nothing more than a dev reading a script and covering his own ass. That's what I saw in a nutshell. David says, really not a good look at all. He blames QA, which is gross, seemingly dismisses PS4 and Xbox One as old, even though this game was announced 8 years ago, and pretends like the PC version was flawless, which in his words it wasn't. He just has really harmed my impression even further. Almost an identical tweet to Imran's, and I have to agree again and reiterate again that they just have to stop with all these apology videos and tweets and just get to fixing the game, because they're doing more harm than good trying to gain cred when they have more important things to worry about. But it shows that they realize that people don't trust them now, myself included. And I'm a huge fan of the Witcher series, and just like mostly everyone else, I thought this company was different, was for the gamer, but alas, I guess we all got punked. So Gene says, our testing did not show a big part of the issues you experienced while playing the game. Huge gulp. I think anyone with the base console versions of the game will have a hard time believing this. Yeah, I mean, what's going on at CDPR? Did they blindfold the game testers as the end of the year joke or something and told them that not even they will see it until it's ready? I don't know. Robbie says, oh, no. You do not get to pull off, and our testers didn't find these issues you all reported. You don't get to throw your QA team under the bus because you made a call to launch knowing the state of the build, and you can't claim accountability, then say that. That is exactly my point. It's like everyone is on the same page, noticing way too many contradictions and one right after the other. But funny enough, CDPR doesn't even have a broad time frame for when Cyberpunk will be purchasable again on the PlayStation Store. So for now, if you've purchased the game already on PS4, then you can still play it, it's yours, and you can still go out and pick up a physical copy if you're like me who fancies self-torment of playing Cyberpunk on a base console. Anyway, thanks for clicking, guys and gals. Leave me a comment on what your take is on all of this. Do you feel played and are still feeling played even after this apology video? Or perhaps are you still on board with CDPR? Let me know. Remember to like the vid, do all those other things if you want. Links are down below. In the meantime, be safe, be gnarly. Mr. Play out.